Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going from a Week 8 UFL Power Rankings. So we'll start off by briefly going over what happened in Week 7. So we saw the Battlehawks beat the Aviators 31-20, the Kings upset the Defenders winning 30-13, the Stallions beat the Renegades 21-17 in overtime, and the Storm beat the Gamblers 24-23. But getting into this week's rankings, beating things 8th or last, I've got the Gamblers. So the Gamblers, they fall to number 8 after they lost to the Storm 24-23, but I actually think the Gamblers played a decent game despite the loss. And I thought the offense for the Gamblers was actually kind of good. Now, they scored 23 points, which isn't amazing, but it's still solid, and it's actually the season high in points in a game for the Gamblers this year. Now, having 23 points be your season high 7 games into the year is pretty bad, but at least they're going in the right direction. But a big reason the offense looked pretty good this week is they finally got good quarterback play, as Hunter Dekkers made his return from injury, and he played pretty well, as he threw for 268 yards and also ran for a score. Now, he did have a few mistakes, as he threw an interception which ended up being a pick 6, and he also missed a receiver late in the fourth quarter on 4th down. But overall, I thought he was pretty good. Now, on the ground, the Gamblers weren't amazing, but they were still decent, as they ran for 98 yards and a score. But while the offense did do a good job moving the ball, as they had 415 yards of offense, they did not do a good job finishing drives, because they turned it over twice, and they also went just 1 for 5 in the red zone. And despite the red zone struggles, they still had one of their better games of the season. But still, definitely some things to clean up on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the defense for Houston, they were pretty solid, as they did end up allowing 24 points, but 7 of them came on the pick 6, and they also only allowed 185 total yards. But I thought this was a pretty good performance for the Gamblers despite the loss, and I've got them at 8, but if they can continue to get good quarterback play from Hunter Dekkers, I don't think they're a team you want to face in the final 3 weeks of the season. But I've got the Gamblers at 8. Coming in at 7, I've got the Aviators. So the Aviators, they fall to number 7 after they lost to the Battlehawks by a score of 31-20. And this was not their best game. They got off to a slow start as they were trailing 14-0 at the end of the first quarter, and then they were down 24-7 at halftime. Now, they did start the second half on a pretty good note with an interception and then a touchdown, but they were never really able to build on that, and they ended up falling short in their comeback attempt. Now, I was pretty worried about the Aviators' offense coming into this game, but the offense actually wasn't that bad. And they played pretty well, especially on the ground, despite facing the league's best rush defense, as they still ran for 120 yards and a touchdown on 5.7 yards per carry. Now, the pass game for the Aviators still wasn't anything amazing, and it's kind of been that way all year, as Jalen McClendon threw for 153 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. So, decent, but nothing amazing. Then the defense for the Aviators, they weren't too great. They had been playing pretty well over their past few games, but this was not their best game, as they allowed 31 points, over 300 yards, and over 5 yards per play. But this was not a great showing for the Aviators. They were a team I thought they were headed in the right direction, and they still could be, but they're now 2-5 on the year, and making the playoffs seems pretty unlikely. But I've got the Aviators at 7. Coming in at 6, I've got the Renegades. The Renegades check in at 6 after they lost again, as this time they lost to the Stallions 21-17 in overtime. Now, this was a game for the Renegades where they definitely had a chance to win, and they actually led this game for the majority of the game, and they even had their chance to win it at the end of regulation, but their game-winning field goal attempt got blocked, and then they ended up losing in overtime. But I do think this game was still a step in the right direction for the Renegades, because at least they were competitive this week after getting blown out each of their last 3 games. But I still don't really think the Renegades played that well, especially offensively, because the offense scored just 17 points, and it seems like they had a very conservative game plan, because they did not take many chances, and as a team they only averaged 3.8 yards per play. Now, they did run the ball fairly effectively, rushing for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns on 3.8 yards per carry, but this passing game was very conservative. They played things very safe, and they really didn't push the ball downfield at all. As Austin Reed, he went 25 for 37 for just 166 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions, and he averaged 4.5 yards per pass attempt. Now, I do think part of the reason they didn't want him to throw the ball downfield is because he turned the ball over quite a bit over the past 2 games, trying to protect the football, which they did not end up doing, but it just really limited what their offense can do and also made them extremely boring to watch. But overall, I don't think they played their best game offensively. Now, the defense for the Renegades, they had been terrible over their past few games, but I thought their defense played pretty well, because they were facing an offense that was trending upwards, and they held them to just 17 points in regulation, 21 total points in the entire game. So I thought the defense looked pretty good. But as far as the whole team goes for the Renegades, this was still not a great performance. They've now lost 4 straight games. They're out of a playoff spot if the playoffs start today. They're now 3-4, and I've got them at number 6 in my power rankings. Coming in at number 5, I've got the Kings. So the Kings then move up all the way to number 5 after they upset the Defenders, winning by a score of 30-13. And this was a great game for the Kings. And it's really crazy how they can go from looking terrible one week to great the next week. And they're now alternating when they look good and bad. Because in week 5, they scored 47 and beat the Renegades in a great game. Week 6, the offense is lifeless. They lose 16-3 against the Battlehawks. And in week 7 this week, they come out and they dominate the Defenders, who look like the best team in the league. But very interesting how they're up and down like that. But they played a really good game. Quarterback Chandler Rogers had a great game, throwing for 201 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the Kings, they're also great on the ground, rushing for 165 yards and another score on 5 yards per carry. And they did all of this while facing one of the best defenses in the UFL. And it's also hilarious because in my predictions video for this week, I said this offense was terrible. They couldn't run the ball. I wasn't a big Chandler Rogers fan. And in this week, they come out against one of the best defenses in the league, and they drop 30. So, of course, that had to be the timing. But the offense, they played really well. Then the defense for the Kings, they're also really good, and they've just been so good all year long. But this was a really good game, as they held the highest scoring offense in the league to just 13 points, and they were dominant in the second half. As in the second half, the Kings, they forced 4 turnovers and 2 3-and-outs. But they really dominated in the second half. It was an overall dominant win for the Kings against arguably the best team in the UFL. And we will have to see if they can keep it up and continue to play at a high level, but this was definitely their best game of the season. And after the win, they're now 3-4, 5th in the UFL standings, and also 5th in my power rankings. Coming in at number 4, I've got the Stallions. So the Stallions, they're number 4 after they beat the Renegades by a score of 21-17 in overtime. Now, I don't think the Stallions played anywhere close to their best game, but they did enough to get the win. Now, offensively, I don't think the Stallions were that good, as they just 230 total yards, but Dorian Thompson-Robinson made some big plays late in the fourth quarter and overtime to lead the Stallions to the win. And DTR wasn't great, going just 12 for 26, but he was okay, and he also threw 2 touchdowns. And wide receiver Jaden Mickens was great once again, with 6 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown. And he also caught the game-winning score in overtime. And it's actually insane how important he is to the Stallions offense, because whenever they need a big play, it's always Jaden Mickens. And it's been that way all year long, and after this game, he actually leads the UFL in receiving yards. Now, the run game for the Stallions, they were pretty bad, as they ran for just 71 yards on 3.7 yards per carry, but the offense still ran the ball effectively at times, but not that often. Now, the defense for the Stallions, I don't think they were anything amazing, and I think they were helped out by a really conservative offensive game plan, but the defense, they were still pretty solid. This is another big win for the Stallions. They're now 3-4 on the year after back-to-back wins, and I've got them at number 4 in my power rankings. Number 3, I've got the Orlando Storm. So the Storm, they've remained at number 3 after they beat the Gamblers by a score of 24-23 and snapped their 2-game losing streak. And this is a big win for the Storm, just being able to get back in the win column and avoid that 3rd straight loss. Now, they still did not play very well, and I don't think they played anywhere close to their best game, but it was still good enough to get the win. Now, the offense for the Storm was okay. They scored 24 points, but only 185 total yards of offense. But they did do a pretty good job capitalizing on the Gamblers' mistakes. But the offense as a whole was not that great. They couldn't run the ball, and the pass game was nothing too impressive. Really, the only offensive player who I thought played a good game was wide receiver Elijah Badger, and he was great as he caught 2 touchdowns. But outside of that, I really don't think this offense was that great. Now, the defense for the Storm, they also were not amazing, as they allowed 415 total yards, but they did force a couple turnovers, and they were great in the red zone, holding the Gamblers to a lot of field goal tries. But as I said, I don't think the Storm played anywhere close to their best game, but they were still able to get the win, get back on track, and I've got the Storm at number 3 in my power rankings. Number 2, I've got the St. Louis Battlehawks. The Battlehawks, they're number 2 after they beat the Aviators by a score of 31-20, and this is a really good win for the Battlehawks. The offense was great, and a big reason why is they finally made the switch to Luis Perez at quarterback, and he was great in his Battlehawks debut, as he threw for 204 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception, and he actually also ran for a score, not something you see every day out of Luis Perez. And the Battlehawks, they were also pretty solid on the ground, rushing for 106 yards and 3 scores. And this offense as a whole just looked really good, especially with the threat of a downfield passing game, because with Harrison Frost, he just was not that good. So now having a quarterback who can consistently push the ball downfield really adds another element to this offense, and it just makes the team as a whole a lot better. And then the defense for the Battlehawks, they weren't the greatest, and they were surprisingly bad against the run, but they still only allowed 20 points. But this is another win for the Battlehawks. They're now 5-2 on the year. They've won 3 straight games. And I've got them at number 2, but you can definitely make the argument they should be at number 1. But I've got the Battlehawks at number 2. And coming into at number 1, I've got the DC Defenders. So I do have the Defenders staying at number 1 despite the loss to the Kings 30-13. Now, you could definitely say they should fall to 2 or even 3 because they look pretty bad. But I'm keeping them at number 1 despite the loss because I still think they're the best team in the UFL. Now, they did not play that well, but I still think this is probably the best team. But the Defenders, they actually got off to a good start in this game as they led 13-3. But then Derek Roberson had that huge hit that was called for a penalty on Chandler Rogers, and that completely changed the game. As after that penalty, the Defenders were outscored 27-0, and they looked pretty bad after that point in the game. Now, the offense for the Defenders, they only scored 13 points, but they were still solid, and Jordan Tayama had a solid game, as he threw for 353 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 second-half interceptions. And speaking of the second-half offense for the Defenders, they're absolutely terrible. As in the second half, their drives went fumble, 3-and-out, 3-and-out, interception, interception, fumble, and then their final drive, they just ran out the clock. So it was a really bad offensive showing in the second half. And anytime you turn the ball over 4 times in a half, that is definitely pretty bad. And then the defense for the Defenders, they also weren't that good, as they allowed a season-high 30 points, with 20 of them coming in the second half. But this is a really bad game all around for the Defenders, and as I said before, I think you can drop them if you want. I still think they're the best team in the league, which is why I have them at 1, but I am definitely interested to see how the Defenders bounce back, especially having to face the Kings again next week. But I do have the Defenders at 1. But those are my Week 8 UFL Power Rankings. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.